Picture a building that looks like it was woven by hand. A vast tangle of steel beams crossing and recrossing each other in a pattern that seems almost accidental from a distance, and entirely deliberate up close. 91,000 seats arranged inside a structure that has no obvious parallel anywhere in the history of sports architecture. The Bird's Nest, Beijing, August 2008. For 16 days, this was the most watched building on the planet. The opening ceremony alone drew an estimated television audience of close to 1 billion people. Inside, Usain Bolt rewrote the record books. Michael Phelps won 8 gold medals in a single games, a number that had never been achieved before and may never be achieved again. The Chinese team topped the gold medal table on home soil for the first and, so far, only time. By most measures, the 2008 Beijing Olympics were one of the most spectacular sporting events ever staged. And in the years that followed, the Bird's Nest sat largely empty for stretches that became longer and more difficult to explain. A structure that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to build, and whose original purpose, it turned out, no city in the world could fully sustain once the cameras moved on. This is the story of what happens when ambition meets arithmetic. And in Beijing, those two things were further apart than almost anyone had planned for. To understand the scale of what China built for 2008, you have to start with a number that is almost impossible to hold in your head. Estimates for the total cost of the Beijing Games, including infrastructure, security, and the construction of new venues, range from around $40 to $44 billion. That figure is contested, and different sources define the boundaries of Olympic spending differently. But by any calculation, Beijing 2008 was one of the most expensive sporting events in human history. China was making a statement, not just about its ability to host an Olympic Games, but about its place in the world in the 21st century. The Beijing Olympics were conceived from the very beginning as a coming-out party, a demonstration to a global audience that China had arrived as a modern superpower, and that its capital city was worthy of standing alongside any city on Earth. The venues were the most visible expression of that ambition. The National Stadium, the Bird's Nest, was designed by the Swiss architecture firm Herzog and de Meuron, with Chinese artist Ai Weiwei serving as artistic consultant in the early stages of the project. The brief was simple in concept and extraordinarily complex in execution. Create a building that would be instantly recognizable anywhere in the world, that would become a symbol of China's moment on the global stage, and that would be capable of hosting the opening and closing ceremonies of the Games in front of the largest possible audience. The result was a structure unlike anything that had been built before. 42,000 tons of steel, bent and shaped into a lattice that wraps around the bowl of the stadium without a single straight line on its exterior. The cost of the National Stadium alone ran to several $100 million, with significant cost increases during construction as the design proved more technically challenging than original estimates had assumed. Beside it, the National Aquatic Center, known as the Water Cube, took a different architectural approach. A building sheathed in a grid of translucent blue bubbles based on the geometry of soap foam that glowed at night like something from another world. It was here that Michael Phelps completed his record-breaking program, and here that swimming world records fell with a frequency that the sport has never quite seen before or since. Both buildings were genuinely extraordinary. Both were built at extraordinary cost. The opening ceremony on the 8th of August 2008 set the tone for everything that followed. 15,000 performers, a display of choreographic precision and technical scale that had never been attempted at any previous Olympics, and a visual spectacle that left the global audience struggling for adequate superlatives. China had spent years preparing for this moment. The preparation showed. 16 days later, the games ended, the athletes went home, and the Bird's Nest was left to figure out what it was for. This is the part of the Beijing story that receives far less attention than the opening ceremony. The National Stadium had no permanent sporting tenant. No football club in the Chinese Super League was based there. No athletics meeting ran there regularly. The venue had been designed and built for a specific event, the world's biggest sporting occasion, And once that event was over, finding a use for a 91,000-seat stadium in a city of 20 million people proved to be considerably more difficult than building it. In the years following the games, the Bird's Nest became, in large part, a tourist attraction. Visitors came to see the building, to walk through its concourse, to take photographs beneath the steel lattice that had become one of the most recognizable structures on Earth. Millions of them, in fact, and the site drew significant tourist numbers, particularly in the years immediately after 2008. In that sense, the stadium was being used. But being used as a museum is not quite the same as being used as a sports venue. And the costs of maintaining a structure of that complexity and scale do not reduce simply because the crowds are there to look rather than to watch. Occasional events were staged there over the years, including concerts, football exhibition matches, and a handful of athletics meetings. But the frequency of these events never matched the scale of the building. Reports from various periods in the years after 2008 described maintenance costs running into the tens of millions of dollars annually, with the revenues generated by tourism and occasional events falling well short of covering them. The Chinese government, with resources far greater than Greece or Brazil, was able to absorb those costs in ways that other host nations could not. But the underlying mismatch between the cost of the building and its post-games utility was real regardless of who was paying for it. The water cube followed a different trajectory. In the years after the games, the interior of the building was converted into a water park, a commercial leisure facility that gave the space a new everyday purpose, drawing families and tourists in numbers that justified keeping the building open and operational. It was not what the architects had designed it for, and there is something faintly surreal about a venue that hosted 8 of Michael Phelps' Olympic gold medals being converted into a venue for inflatable slides and leisure swimming. But it worked, in the sense that it generated revenue, attracted visitors, and gave the building a function in the years when the Olympics felt very far away. And then something happened that no other Olympic host city has managed. Beijing bid for the 2022 Winter Olympics and won. For the first time in the history of the Games, a single city would host both the Summer and Winter Olympics. The Bird's Nest, which had spent 14 years searching for a consistent purpose, was reopened as the venue for the opening and closing ceremonies of the 2022 Winter Games. The water cube was converted once again, this time into the ice cube, repurposed as the venue for curling, its pools drained, and its interior transformed into a sheet of ice. The images of the Bird's Nest lit up again for the 2022 ceremonies were striking, precisely because of the gap they bridged. The same building, 14 years apart, hosting the same ritual, the Parade of Nations, the lighting of the flame, for the second time. No other structure in Olympic history has done that. But the 2022 Winter Games also brought the Beijing story into sharper focus. If it took 14 years and a second Olympic bid to give the Bird's Nest a clear moment of relevance again, that says something about how difficult it is to sustain a venue of this scale and specificity in the years between major events. The stadium found its second act, but the second act required another Olympics to write it. And that's where Beijing becomes more than just a success story with a complicated middle chapter. The 2008 Games were genuinely spectacular. The venues were genuinely extraordinary. China's ability to deliver on the promise of that opening ceremony in terms of logistical complexity, aesthetic ambition, and sheer organizational scale was remarkable. But the legacy of the Bird's Nest in the years between 2008 and 2022 was an object lesson in the same problem that haunts every major sporting venue in this series. The gap between what a building needs to justify itself on opening day and what it needs to justify itself on every other day of the year. The steel lattice is still there, catching the light over the Olympic green the same way it did in August 2008. The water cube still glows blue at night, even if what happens inside it now looks nothing like what happened there when the world was watching. For 16 days in the summer of 2008, this was the center of the world's attention. Records were broken here. History was made here. a country introduced itself to the world on a scale that had never been attempted before. What came after was quieter, more complicated, more honest about the distance between what these buildings cost and what they can sustain. The games lasted 16 days. The mortgage lasted considerably longer.